Wait, are you actually saying that tiny thing could kill Commander KX? Seriously? Zix Tall leaned toward the containment field, their 4 crystalline eyes catching the glow of the force barrier as they peered at the small arachnid inside. Professor Helena Chan fought back a smirk, keeping her tone professional despite the alien student's clear disbelief. That's right, this is a Brazilian wandering spider, specifically a female Phenutria nigriventer. It's one of Earth's deadliest spiders. On our planet, size rarely determines danger. The room filled with a chorus of hums and soft chimes, expressions of surprise and curiosity among the 15 towering Arxon students. Their crystalline forms, ranging from 8 to 10 feet tall, made the already cramped classroom feel even smaller. They crowded around the 6-inch containment cube, their sheer size making the scene almost comical. But Commander KX survived direct hits from Plasfire in the Riel campaign. Mixer argued, their crystalline body darkening to deep purple, a color tied to alarm in Arxon biology. He even lifted a shuttle using just his manifestation fields. I'm well aware of your commander's impressive feats, Helena replied, activating a holoscreen that displayed KX's distinguished record. He's extraordinary even by human standards. But here's the thing, assuming physical strength translates to immunity against toxins is a common mistake in xenobiology. She lightly tapped the containment field, prompting the spider to shift slightly. The entire class recoiled in synchronized fear, their crystalline bodies resonating like a startled wind chime. Helena had to stifle a chuckle. This spider's venom, she continued, is a potent mix of neurotoxins. It doesn't matter how strong your crystalline structure is or how many manifestation fields you can create. Once the venom enters your system, she paused for effect, it starts disrupting your neural pathways immediately. But we don't even have nerves like humans, Zix exclaimed, their crystalline surface flickering orange with curiosity. We have crystalline neural networks. Exactly, Helena said, her tone growing animated. And that's what makes this even more fascinating. Your crystalline pathways are actually more vulnerable to certain components of the venom. We discovered this by accident during a study last year when the soft hiss of the classroom door interrupted her. A towering crystalline figure stepped in, his presence commanding instant silence. Commander KX had arrived, his formidable form shimmering with a cool blue aura. His gaze swept the room, and the students immediately stood at attention, their tones harmonizing in perfect respect. Commander, they called in unison. At ease, KX rumbled, his deep voice resonating throughout the room. He turned to Helena, his glowing form shifting slightly as a polite gesture. I trust the lesson is going as planned, Professor? Perfect timing, Commander, Helena replied with a warm smile. We were just discussing how even the smallest creatures can outmatch the strongest among us in the right circumstances. We were just discussing how this tiny creature here could, theoretically, pose a lethal threat to an Arxon of your remarkable stature, Helena said with a sly smile. Commander KX stepped closer to the containment field, his towering form dominating the room. His crystalline body shimmered faintly, shifting into a pale yellow pattern Helena had come to recognize as Arxon amusement. He examined the spider carefully. Professor Chun, while I admire Earth's extraordinary biodiversity, I must assume you're exaggerating for dramatic effect. This organism is barely perceptible to our visual sensors. Would you like to review the chemical analysis, Commander? Helena's grin widened as she brought up another holoscreen. Our research has extensively documented the venom's interaction with crystalline neural networks. The data speaks for itself. The next 15 minutes were filled with an increasingly animated exchange as KX meticulously reviewed the findings. His crystalline form cycled through a spectrum of disbelief, shock, and eventually reluctant acceptance. The students watched in silent awe as their renowned commander, hero of countless campaigns, was methodically convinced that a tiny Earth spider could indeed end his illustrious career in less than half an hour. Incredible, KX finally admitted, his crystalline surface settling into a thoughtful green hue. Truly incredible. And you're telling me this isn't even your most dangerous spider? Not even close, Helena replied with a smirk. Wait until you hear about the Sydney funnel web spider. Or, better yet, let me introduce you to some of our cone snails. Professor, Zix interjected, their crystalline matrix flickering with vibrant curiosity. Is this why the Unified Species Council classified Earth as a death world? Death world? Helena blinked, taken aback. Is that what they're calling us? Indeed, KX confirmed. Earth was officially designated a Class 13 death world shortly after first contact. This exchange program is regarded as a survival challenge in our educational system. Helena couldn't suppress her laughter. A death world? Because of spiders and snails? Oh, just wait until next week's lesson on Australian wildlife. The crystalline matrices of the entire entire class flickered with alarm, their forms subtly backing away from her desk. Speaking of which, Helena continued, reaching for another containment field. Who'd like to meet a box jellyfish? The sound of 15 Arkson students retreating in unison created a harmonic resonance that made the classroom windows rattle. Professor Chun, KX said, his tone now tinged with newfound respect. I'm beginning to understand why humans are regarded with such awe. To thrive on a planet with so many lethal life forms is no small feat. Oh, these aren't even the terrifying ones, Helena replied nonchalantly. These are just the safe ones for a classroom setting. Remind me to tell you about bacteria sometime, or viruses, or better yet, prion. The rest of the lesson was spent discussing Earth's deadliest organisms, with KX occasionally pausing to take notes, his crystalline structure radiating disbelief. By the end of the session, the legendary commander formally requested permission to audit future classes, citing tactical research as his primary motivation. As the students filed out, still buzzing about the spider, Helena caught Zixtal murmuring to Mixer, no wonder humans are fearless in space. Their own planet is constantly trying to kill them. I heard some of them keep these creatures, Mixer replied, their crystalline matrix flickering with patterns of sheer disbelief. Helena couldn't help herself. Actually, she called out, many humans welcome spiders into their homes. They're great at keeping pests under control. The startled chiming of the Arkson students reverberated down the hallway, followed by KX's deep, resonant laugh. Professor Chun, KX remarked, his tone amused, I suspect you take great joy in frightening my students. Helena smiled as she carefully locked away the spider's containment field. Would you believe me if I told you that spider isn't even the most dangerous thing in this classroom? KX's crystalline form shifted to a curious shade of purple. What could possibly be more dangerous than that spider? Helena tapped the side of her head. The human brain, Commander. We're the species that studies these creatures, extracts their venoms, and finds ways to use them. Did you know we've developed medicines from spider venom? KX's crystalline structure shimmered in a way that Helena recognized from her studies, an unmistakable humans are insane response. Yet his voice carried a note of reluctant admiration. Professor, I believe all Arksons share the same sentiment. Your species is both terrifying and brilliant. Helena grinned. A wise perspective, Commander. And just wait until next semester when I teach about the human microbiome. Did you know the average human body carries around 39 trillion bacteria? The ripple of colors that passed through KX's crystalline form at this revelation would later be immortalized in Arkson scientific texts as the precise moment the Arkson Defense Force realized every human was essentially a walking biological weapon. As KX exited the classroom, visibly deep in thought, Helena began tidying up for her next session. She chuckled softly, recalling the old adage, the most dangerous thing on Earth isn't its creatures, it's human ingenuity. By the following day, enrollment in the Earth Sciences program at the Arkson Military Academy tripled. Officially, this was attributed to critical tactical research into potential biological threats. Unofficially, however, a simpler explanation circulated in crystalline whispers. You'd better understand the species that survived on a planet actively trying to kill them, and turned it to their advantage. Back in her office, Helena was already preparing next week's lecture. Platypus venom, box jellyfish neurotoxins, and the blue-ringed octopus were all on the agenda. She had a strong suspicion that Commander KX would find this new chapter in Earth's evolutionary story both terrifying and fascinating. After all, what better way to showcase humanity's ingenuity than to highlight how they transformed their planet's deadliest threats into tools for healing? It was, Helena mused, the quintessential human response to life on a death world. If you can't defeat the danger, study it until you can harness its power. The small spider in its containment field shifted, one of its legs waving faintly as if in agreement. Helena chuckled and made a mental note to request additional containment units. Something told her there would be an influx of curious visitors to her classroom in the near future. Ultimately, it wasn't the size or ferocity of Earth's creatures that left the galaxy in awe. It was humanity's extraordinary ability to not just survive alongside them, but to thrive, analyze, and even turn their most lethal qualities into assets. This was a lesson the Arksons would never forget, particularly after Commander KX submitted an updated Earth threat assessment to the Unified Species Council. The planet's classification was revised from Class 13 Death World to Class 13 Death World with extremely resourceful inhabitants. It was the first time in galactic history that a planetary designation came with a subtitle. Back in her classroom, Helena smiled to herself, knowing her upcoming lessons would only reinforce this new classification. After all, she hadn't even begun to cover Australian wildlife yet. Today, class, we're going to discuss something that makes that spider look downright harmless, Professor Helena Chun announced, addressing her now expanded group of 30 Arkson students. Commander Commander KX, seated at the back, emanated subtle ripples of concern through his crystalline form. What could possibly be worse than the little Deathbringer? Zixtal asked, their crystal matrix flickering with nervous curiosity. Helena's grin widened as she activated the holographic display. Oh, you're in for a treat. Today, we're covering something so dangerous even humans approach it with extreme caution. Something invisible, relentless, and scientifically fascinating. The holoprojector illuminated the center of the room, displaying an enlarged microscopic view of a warped protein structure. This, Helena said dramatically, is a prion. The room fell silent. KX's crystalline surface shifted to a deep indigo shade, a reaction Helena had never seen before. Professor, he said cautiously, his deep voice carrying a note of disbelief, my understanding is that this is just a protein? Precisely, Helena replied, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. A misfolded protein, to be exact. No DNA, no RNA, no cellular structure. It isn't even alive. Yet, she let the moment linger. It's nearly indestructible and always fatal once symptoms appear. The classroom erupted into a cacophony of crystalline harmonics, the students struggling to process the information. How can something that's not alive cause death? Mixer asked, their voice tinged with confusion. That's what makes it so fascinating, Helena said, pacing as she spoke. Picture a rogue template, one that corrupts every normal protein it contacts, forcing them to adopt its defective structure. A chain reaction of destruction, unstoppable and deadly. The students' crystalline bodies flickered with a kaleidoscope of colors, confusion, fear, and awe. KX remained silent, his form darkening as he absorbed the implications. And the most astonishing part? Helena continued, there's no cure, no treatment. Humans have spent decades studying these, yet they remain one of the most dangerous mysteries of biology. The ripple of reactions across KX's form became something of a legend among future generations of Arxan xenobiologists. It would later be recorded in academic papers as the moment the Arxan Defense Force fully grasped the terrifying ingenuity of humanity. As Helena wrapped up her lecture, she glanced at the clock and smiled. Next week, we'll dive into some of Earth's venomous marine life. Box jellyfish, blue-ringed octopuses, and of course, platypus venom. I think you'll find them equally fascinating. Commander KX leaned forward slightly, his crystalline surface reflecting faint traces of resignation and respect. Professor Chun, I believe the galaxy still underestimates your species. I'm not sure whether to be terrified or inspired. Helena laughed softly, locking the holo display. A bit of both, Commander. That's the human way. You can't kill it because it was never alive, Helena explained, pacing in front of the hologram. Traditional sterilization methods? Completely ineffective. These things survive autoclave temperatures, and some can endure radiation that would obliterate any living organism. The students' crystalline matrices pulsed with increasingly alarmed patterns. KX raised what passed for an Arxan hand. Professor Chun, are you saying Earth harbors non-living particles capable of converting other molecules into copies of themselves? Exactly, Helena confirmed, her tone carrying the excitement of a seasoned scientist. And here's the fascinating part, they're species-specific. Some prion diseases can jump between species, while others seem locked to a single one. We're still unraveling the mechanisms behind that. Wait, Zix interrupted, their matrix flickering rapidly with shock. You said, still unraveling. Are you saying humans know about these things and keep studying them? Helena's grin widened. Of course, we've dedicated entire research facilities to understanding prion. In fact, we've made remarkable strides in recent years toward potential treatments for prion diseases. The room fell silent. The faint harmonic resonance of the Arxan's crystal structures was the only sound, a quiet chorus of unease. Let me clarify, KX said, his crystalline form cycling through shades of blue and purple. Your species discovered these proteins, capable of corrupting others, nearly indestructible and invariably fatal, and your response was to build laboratories to study them? Well, how else would we figure out how to fight them? Helena shrugged as though the answer was obvious. It's what we do. Find something dangerous, study it, learn how to deal with it, and ideally turn it into something useful. Useful? Mixer's crystalline structure flashed patterns of sheer disbelief. How could something like this ever be useful? You'd be surprised, Helena replied. By studying prion, we've gained groundbreaking insights into protein folding and misfolding. This research is key to combating neurodegenerative diseases. We're even exploring applications in material science. Imagine Imagine harnessing a self-propagating protein structure. If we can control it, the possibilities are endless. The class stared at her in collective crystalline horror, their harmonics growing faint. Professor, KX finally said, his voice tinged with resigned understanding. I believe I now comprehend why the Unified Species Council recently updated Earth's classification. The new note reads, Warning, local sentients exhibit unparalleled risk tolerance and dangerous levels of scientific curiosity. Approach with extreme caution. Helena laughed, her voice echoing warmly. Risk tolerance? Oh, Commander, you haven't seen anything yet. Next week, we're diving into supersaturated oxygen environments and why humans are basically walking chemical combustion hazards. Did you know we're one of the few species capable of surviving in an oxygen-rich atmosphere? Most species would spontaneously ignite. The sound of 30 Arxan students simultaneously processing the idea that humans were effectively living oxidation hazards was something Helena knew she'd remember fondly. But before we tackle that, she continued, her tone bright, let's explore another fascinating Earth phenomenon, autoimmune diseases. You're going to love this one. You see, sometimes our own immune systems turn against us, attacking our own tissues. And somehow, we've managed to turn even that into medical treatments. The remainder of the class was a lively discussion about how humans had transformed potentially lethal flaws in their biology into therapeutic innovations. By the end, even Zix's crystalline matrix displayed colors indicating a mix of horror and reluctant admiration. As the students filed out, their crystal harmonics humming with nervous energy, Commander KX lingered. Professor Chan, he began, his form settling into a contemplative shade of green. I've faced some of the galaxy's most dangerous species, survived plasma storms, and navigated gravitational anomalies. Yet I must admit, your planet's hazards and your species' approach to them are unlike anything I've encountered. Helena smiled warmly. What's even more fascinating, Commander, is that everything we've discussed so far has been on the macro scale. Just wait until we dive into quantum biology. Did you know some scientists believe our sense of smell might involve quantum tunneling? KX's crystalline form flickered to pure white, a hue Helena had never seen before in an Arxan. His voice, measured and deliberate, broke the silence. Professor, I'm starting to see why humans mastered faster-than-light travel so quickly. Your entire existence is a quantum uncertainty event. Helena beamed. That might be the nicest compliment humanity's ever received. Speaking of uncertainty, next week's lesson will cover extremophile bacteria and their potential applications in biochemistry. You'll love it. KX's exit from the classroom was uncharacteristically brisk. Helena thought she caught a faint mutter as he departed, something about revising the Arxan Defense Force's first contact protocols with an addendum, caution. Species weaponizes every aspect of existence, including biological malfunctions. As she tidied up, Helena made a mental note to send KX some materials on how humans had used viral vectors for gene therapy. What better way to illustrate humanity's ingenuity than by showing how they had repurposed their own pathogens into medical tools? Reflecting on the semester, Helena marveled at the transformation in the Arxan perspective. At first, they'd seen humans as fragile beings from a perilous world. Now they understood the truth. Humanity didn't merely endure Earth's dangers, they thrived because of them. The next day, the Unified Species Council received a formal proposal from the Arxan Science Academy, requesting a permanent research exchange program with Earth's universities. The justification was succinct. They have mastered the art of turning death into survival. We must learn their methods. Helena could hardly wait to teach them about using neurotoxins as local anesthetics. She decided, however, to save the lecture on humanity's creative use of capsaicin, both as a food additive and a defensive spray, for another time. Some things were best introduced gradually. After all, when introducing aliens to the absurd brilliance of human innovation, pacing was everything. Professor Chun, is it true that humans intentionally consume poisons for enjoyment? The question came from a new student, Nxra, whose crystalline form shimmered with genuine bewilderment. Helena, in the middle of preparing for class, paused and turned to face the now-packed room. 40 Arxan students sat before her, along with Commander KX and 2 additional military observers. Word of her lectures had evidently spread through the Arxan Defense Force. That's one way to put it, Helena replied with a grin. But yes, we do. In fact, today's lesson is about exactly that, capsaicin and other chemicals humans consume for pleasure. KX's crystalline body shifted into his humans our insane pattern, a mauve shimmer streaked with gold flecks. Helena activated a holographic display, and a bright red chili pepper materialized above her desk. Today, we're discussing how humans took plant defense mechanisms and turned them into both recreation and weaponry. Can anyone tell me what this is? Zix raised a hand. According to our xenobotanical database, it's a plant that produces capsaicin, a chemical irritant meant to deter mammals from eating it. Exactly, Helena said. And what do you think humans did when we discovered this plant, which evolved its own chemical defense system specifically to avoid being eaten? The room was silent until Mixer hesitantly ventured. Based on previous lessons, you studied it and weaponized it? Oh, we did better than that, Helena replied, her grin widening. We turned it into a competitive sport. The room filled with a chorus of chiming confusion. Let me explain, Helena said, pulling up images of various chili peppers. Humans didn't just eat these peppers despite their chemical defenses. We bred them to be even stronger. We created varieties so potent they can cause physical pain. Then we hold contests to see who can endure eating the most. One of the military observers raised a crystalline appendage, their structure flashing distressed patterns. Professor, are you saying humans deliberately expose themselves to chemical irritants as a form of entertainment? Exactly, Helena said brightly, but that's not all. We also turned capsaicin into a defensive weapon, pepper spray, and a popular food additive. Essentially, we took a plant that said, I've evolved a chemical weapon to stop mammals from eating me, and humans responded, challenge accepted. We eat it specifically because of that chemical, breed the plant to make its defenses stronger, and use those defenses to flavor other foods. The class erupted in a chaotic symphony of crystalline vibrations. But why? KX finally asked, his form cycling through a spectrum of disbelief. Why not? Helena replied with a shrug. Capsaicin interacts with pain receptors without causing real damage. Some humans actually enjoy the sensation. Plus, it has practical uses. For example, we've developed topical treatments using capsaicin to manage pain, essentially using the chemical that causes pain to relieve it. She pulled up another display showing bottles of hot sauce and cans of pepper spray. And here's where it gets even more fascinating, Helena said, gesturing to the holographic display. The exact same compound is used in these commercial food products and these law enforcement grade weapons. The difference lies only in concentration and delivery. Professor Chun, Nix's voice wavered, their crystalline form shimmering with unease. Are you saying humans carry weapons that are essentially concentrated food seasonings? Exactly. Helena's enthusiasm made several students instinctively lean back. And just wait until you hear about tear gas and its connection to wasabi. The rest of the lesson delved into humanity's curious relationship with chemical irritants, covering their culinary, medical, and defensive uses. Helena particularly enjoyed explaining the Scoville scale and watching the Arxons struggle to comprehend the idea of humans creating a standardized system to measure how much pain they could inflict on themselves through food. And remember, she concluded with a smile, this is just one example of how humans take things meant to harm or kill us and turn them into something useful or entertaining or both. Next week, we'll explore alcohol fermentation and how humans discovered that controlled poisoning could double as a recreational activity. KX's crystalline form briefly displayed a color pattern that would later confound the xenolinguistics department for months. The closest translation they could provide was, evolutionary self-preservation instincts have officially checked out. As the students filed out, a mix of fascination and horror vibrating through their crystalline forms, Helena overheard one of the military observers mutter, no wonder they survived first contact. How do you intimidate a species that turns chemical weapons into hot sauce? The next day, the Arxon Diplomatic Corps issued an urgent memo to all field agents. When interacting with humans, do not mistake their use of harmful substances for hostility. They seem to have evolved beyond traditional survival instincts and may genuinely be enjoying themselves. Meanwhile, in her office, Helena began preparing for the next lesson on fermentation, distillation, and how humans had turned poisons into a multi-trillion-dollar global industry. She was particularly excited to explain how nearly every human culture independently discovered that anything containing sugar could be transformed into alcohol. Her gaze drifted to the small spider in its containment field, still the centerpiece of her first lecture. She mused aloud, maybe I should do a special session on how humans turned venoms into medicines. Nothing captures our essence better than looking at something deadly and thinking, I bet we could use this to save lives. The spider shifted slightly, one of its legs twitching as if in agreement, or perhaps just repositioning itself. Either way, Helena smiled. She knew her class was fundamentally reshaping how the Arxons viewed humanity. They had come expecting resilient but fragile beings. They were leaving with the realization that humans weren't just survivors. They were alchemists, capable of transforming death into utility, weapons into medicines, and danger into amusement. As she finalized her lesson plans, Helena received a notification that the Unified Species Council had added yet another amendment to Earth's classification. Warning: local sentients exhibit a concerning capacity to derive enjoyment climate from lethal substances and hazardous conditions. Cultural exchange programs should mandate comprehensive safety protocols for both aliens visiting Earth and any Earth substances introduced to other worlds. Helena chuckled to herself. Just wait until they learn about humans and extreme sports, she thought. After all, what better encapsulated humanity's spirit than willingly leaping out of a perfectly functioning aircraft for the sheer thrill of it? But that was a discussion for another day. For now, she had to figure out how to explain to a classroom of crystalline aliens why humans had once looked at toxic mold growing on grain and thought, what if we purified this into medicine? The tale of Arrow and the origins of modern pharmaceuticals would either fascinate them or convince them that humans were completely unhinged. Probably both. Today, Professor Helena Chan began, addressing her now infamous xenobiology class. We're going to cover a topic that makes everything we've discussed so far seem perfectly reasonable by comparison. She paused, savoring the nervous crystalline harmonics that rippled through the room. We're talking about human sports and recreational activities. Commander KX, now a permanent fixture at the back of the room, along with a growing number of military observers and xenobiologists, shifted to his usual bracing for human madness color pattern. Professor, Zix hesitantly asked, how could human recreational activities possibly be more alarming than your relationship with toxic substances? Helena's grin widened. Let me ask you this, what would you call a species that invented something called base jumping? She activated the holographic display, showing humans leaping off towering structures with nothing but fabric packs strapped to their backs. The classroom erupted in a chorus of horrified crystalline vibrations. Oh, and that's not even the best part, Helena added, clearly enjoying herself. Sometimes we use specialized suits that let us glide through the air like flying squirrels. We call it wingsuit flying. The fatality rate, let's just say it's noteworthy. One of the military observers raised a trembling crystalline appendage, their distress evident in their shimmering patterns. Professor Chan, they asked, their voice wavering, are you saying humans intentionally leap from deadly heights? For fun? Exactly. And that's just the beginning, Helena replied with enthusiasm. Let me introduce you to free solo climbing. The display shifted to footage of Alex Honnold scaling the sheer face of El Capitan, a 3,000-foot vertical rock wall without any ropes or safety gear. This human is climbing with nothing but his hands, feet, and nerves of steel. The classroom's reaction, a cascade of crystalline vibrations, was so intense it made the windows rattle. But why? Zix finally managed, their crystalline form flashing in patterns Helena hadn't yet cataloged. For fun. For the challenge. Because it's there, Helena replied with a sweep of her hand. Humans have this remarkable drive to push boundaries, even or especially when those boundaries involve mortal danger. When we see something risky, our first thought is often, I wonder if I could do that. She changed the display again, this time showcasing a montage of extreme sports, cave diving through underwater tunnels, boarding down active volcanoes, surfing giant waves, and proximity wingsuit flying mere feet from jagged cliffs. Let me be clear, Helena concluded with a smile. Humans don't just flirt with danger. We court it, challenge it, and sometimes make it our hobby. It's part of who we are. The class spent the next hour exploring extreme sports and their technological offshoots. Helena particularly enjoyed explaining how the development of safety equipment for high-risk activities had driven advancements in material science and medical treatment protocols. As the students filed out, their crystalline forms still vibrating with a mix of awe and disbelief, Commander KX lingered. Professor Chun, he said, his crystalline body shifting into what Helena had come to recognize as his philosophical contemplation pattern. I think I finally understand why humans have thrived in galactic society. Oh, you're completely mad, he added bluntly, but it's an incredibly effective kind of madness. You encounter things that should kill you, and instead of avoiding them, you study, challenge, and ultimately conquer them. It's both terrifying and impressive. Helena grinned. Thank you, Commander. That's probably the most accurate summary of humanity I've ever heard. Just wait until next week's lesson on extreme environment sports. Have you heard of free diving? KX's swift departure was punctuated by crystalline vibrations that the Xenolinguistics department later interpreted as, there's more? Oh no. The following day, the Unified Species Council received an updated entry for Earth's classification. Addendum: human recreational activities frequently exceed survival probability thresholds. Efforts to discourage humans from engaging in seemingly suicidal behaviors are unnecessary. They are likely intentional and supported by safety measures that, while inadequate by any rational standard, align with their unique approach to risk management. In her office, Helena smiled as she prepared her next lecture. She couldn't wait to teach the class about humanity's ability to turn the act of sliding down frozen mountains on wooden planks into an Olympic sport. After all, nothing captured humanity's spirit quite like staring at a snow-covered cliff and thinking, I bet I could ski down that.